Welcome to the Published Author Podcast, where we help entrepreneurs learn how to write a book and leverage it to grow their business and make an impact. I'm your host, Josh Steimle. Today, my guest is Curtis Morley. Curtis is an entrepreneur, speaker, and author of the newly released The Entrepreneur's Paradox: How to Overcome the 16 Pitfalls Along the Startup Journey. Curtis, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Josh. It's so great to be here.
It is great to be talking with you. For the audience, Curtis and I go way back. We're friends from when we were both entrepreneurs in Utah, and now I'm in Boston. You're still in Utah, right, Curtis?
Still in Utah, yep.
And Curtis loves books just as much as I do. If you're watching this on video, you can see we've both got the same background, which is just a bunch of books behind us because we both love reading. But let's talk about your book, Curtis, except before we get to your book, let's talk about your background and let the audience know a little bit about you and your history and where you're coming from. So how far back do you want to go? How did you get started on your own entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, so it's been so fun reconnecting and catching up. So I am still here in Utah, working now on my fifth company, and it's been a crazy ride. I've made every single mistake possible, all of them. And
I know how that goes.
Yeah, yeah. And along the way, realized that there might be a better way to do business. There might be a better way to do this so that don't have to go through all the heartache and all of the struggles and all of the pain. And that's really what I wrote the book about. Was in a way it was a letter to myself, my 25-year-old self, back when we knew each other. It was writing it so that I could avoid all the pitfalls of business, and especially the paradox that is entrepreneurship. So just a little bit about me. I had a full service media agency. Josh and I had agencies at the same time, and then from there a digital sheet music company and a consultancy. And in between my startups, I actually worked for Franklin Covey for 3 years and was in charge of marketing all of the corporate brand as well as global marketing for the entire company. And then a e-learning company, so a company called E-Learning Brothers, and then finally my new company with my book, helping entrepreneurs to take their business to the next level.
So had you always wanted to write a book, or was this a relatively new idea?
The idea formed about 15 years ago. And when I went to work at Franklin Covey, part of my objective of working at Franklin Covey was to understand how they create a bestseller process. And as head of marketing, it was my job to get the books on the bestseller list. And so that was part of my internal motivation of working at Franklin Covey. Franklin Covey has, they're just chronic with bestsellers, and I wanted to figure out the whole publishing process, understand how that worked, and how to get a bestseller.
All right. Well, now you're going to have to spill the beans. So what did you learn? What were some of the secrets you learned about how Franklin Covey makes all those bestsellers?
The best thing they did, they had Dr. Covey, of course. and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People I think it is the #1 best-selling leadership and self-help book of all time.
That wouldn't surprise me.
It's sold tens, if not hundreds of millions of copies. And so that was fantastic. But it was actually a real eye-opener to understand that the game has changed. And the New York Times bestseller list is different than the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, is different than the Amazon list. Each one has their own set of rules and regulations. Wall Street Journal list is very objective. So it will just take a look at total book sales, and it's numbers based. The New York Times is not. The New York Times is subjective. So whether you're not on the list starts with numbers, but actually ends with a committee saying, hey, do we like this book or not? And if they don't, then out you go.
So you can sell 500,000 copies and still not make it onto the New York Times list if they don't like your book.
As a matter of fact, that did happen to Franklin Covey. Yeah, it was by far the #1 bestseller of the week, and it did not make the list. And so, yeah, they've got all sorts of different subjective rules on top of the objective rules. And so, yeah, very, very interesting, very fun to try and figure out what actually makes a bestseller and how to do it.
So with the Wall Street Journal and USA Today and stuff, it's just based on numbers, but it's numbers within 1 week, isn't it?
It is. Yep. So the listings are all basically each week they take the top in each category and they'll publish that. So the importance of getting on the list or getting books sold, if you want to get a bestseller, it's super important to get them sold all in the same week. And that actually means getting them sold before Friday. And the reason what we found, and actually even with my book this time, same thing, is that orders placed on Saturday aren't always counted in that week's load. And so it's really important. Sometimes they are, and if you're lucky they get in there. But if you get them Friday or sooner, then you're going to be in a much more secure place.
So does that mean you should launch a book like Saturday evening or something, because then those orders will probably go into the next week? Or
no, not necessarily. It depends on how much publicity and how much marketing you do. If one thing that's interesting is that with a new release, all of the prior orders to the release date are counted in that week. So everything that you've done, all the sales you've done before the day of launch will all be piled up on that one day. So if you get 10,000 books that you've sold in the 4 months prior, then all 10,000 will count on the day of your launch.
so at Franklin Covey, how far in advance would they start the pre-order process, make it available for pre-order?
Currently, it's I believe it's 3 months. I can't speak 100% for them right now, just because I've been gone from the company for a bit. But yeah, with my book, with the Entrepreneur's Paradox, we went, and we did a push for about 3 months, about 3 or 4 months.
Mm-hmm. So about 3 months. And I mean, this is kind of a tangent. This wasn't what we were planning on talking about, but when you say you know how to do bestseller stuff, we got to talk about that. So, so what were some of the other things that you've done with your book to bump up sales and try to hit those bestseller lists?
One thing that was really effective was getting out there just like this on podcasts, radio shows, etc. But even more than that is I did what I called the book exchange or the keynote exchange strategy. So going out to organizations that I know are interested in entrepreneurship, interested in helping companies succeed, like chambers of commerce, different groups like that, and offering to do a keynote at zero cost if they purchase a copy of the book for every attendee. So with a minimum of 250 books, and so that seemed to be an effective way to get large orders. One other thing that's really interesting is that the formulas now for the bestseller list are so complex, but they track it by name, address, credit card number, and the place that you order it. So, for example, if you order 10 books off of Amazon, like if you were to go right now and order my book and order 10 copies, it actually won't show up as 10 copies. It will show up as a fraction of 10 copies because one person placed a bulk order through Amazon. And so they actually they take fractions instead of the entire bulk order. And the reason they do that is a lot of people have been gaming the system, going
just
and
buying their own book,
and stack it in the garage. And so yeah, it now has, it now tracks all of that. And If you are at the same address with the same login, with the same credit card, then you buy one book, it counts for one. You buy 10 books. Actually, I think the current formula is 8 for 1. So you can buy, if you buy 8 books, it counts for 1. If you buy 9, it counts for 2.
That's interesting. So when you're doing these bulk purchases with the people that you're keynoting at their event, how do you make sure that every one of those books gets counted rather than they buy 500, but it only counts as a couple of sales?
Yeah. Actually, so there's a couple different strategies, but like I'm doing another speech in June where all the attendees went and bought the book individually. So the organizer actually gave them an Amazon gift card, and they went and they individually purchased the book for themselves.
And so that will then count as individual sales, even if the event organizer pays for a bunch of gift cards for everybody.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Got it. Interesting. Well, that's an interesting little tangent there to go off on. So let's go back to the inspiration for the book. Like you said, this was a letter to your younger self. It was giving yourself the advice. What was the vision for what this book could do, though? Obviously, you wanted it to serve and help, but what were your other plans? What were your dreams for what this book would do for you and for your business?
Yeah, I've got a huge, audacious goal. I want to help 1 million entrepreneurs take their business to the next level. And the way that I do that is number one, through the book, but number two is through coaching and mentoring, and through the programs that I've got set up. And as part of my business model, we're doing something super fun. We are actually doing a summit on the summit. So we are going to take a group of 12 to 15 entrepreneurs down to Tanzania and climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And we're actually going to do the training on the mountain as we climb. And so it's
pretty cool.
An amazing adventure. It's going to be crazy. But yeah, so that's the big goal. But yeah, like you said, I came up with the idea about 15 years ago, is when I was sitting in Giordino's Pizza, the deep dish pizza in Chicago, this stuff that's like that thick, and having a conversation with a friend who is also an entrepreneur, very successful entrepreneur. And we were saying, why doesn't everybody start a business? Why does anyone work for corporate America? And my friend said something funny, but very insightful. I said, well, why did you start your business? And he said, well, I'm way too lazy to work the normal way. I had to figure out a better way to do business. And although it was humorous, there was a real golden nugget of knowledge in there, in that there is a better way to do business. There is a better way that doesn't include all the pain. Because like I said, I made all the mistakes, every single one of them that are listed in this book, especially my first 2 companies. I made them, 2 and 3 times. I was just a repeat customer. I just kept coming through the door. Hey, here I am again. Let's make the mistakes again. And it doesn't have to be that way. You don't need a Warren Buffett to be your guide up the mountain anymore. There's solid business principles that anyone can take and apply to their business and succeed. And it's funny because you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they say 30% of small businesses go defunct within the first year, and 50% go out of business within the first 5 years. And I don't believe it. I don't believe it at all. And not that the numbers aren't accurate, because the numbers are accurate. It's a matter of the fact that I don't believe small business or companies go out of business. I believe entrepreneurs quit. And any business that applies the proper principles can see amazing success. Amazing success.
Yeah, well, I mean, you and I, through our agencies, I mean, we survived some of the toughest times for marketing agencies when a lot of other agencies were going under. Because I remember in Utah, like all these big agencies were going under after 9/11. Well, I mean, first there was the dot-com crash, then there was 9/11, then there was a real estate crisis. And during those times, I was scaling down to just myself, or maybe myself and one other person. But I was like, I'm not going out of business. Like, I'm making a choice here. And other people, I think they scaled down to 20 people and then they're like, well, this isn't working out. We should probably just wrap this up or something. But it's like, as long as I can work out of my basement and pay my bills, like I'm still going to run this business until I'm forced to go do something else. Cause I'm like your friend. Like I don't work well in working for other people. I've been fired from every job I've ever had within 5 months. So entrepreneurship, it's the only opportunity for me.
That's the only one. I know what you mean. I totally know what you mean.
I mean, when you own the business, nobody can fire you, right?
There we go. That's exactly it.
So the entrepreneur's paradox, what exactly is the entrepreneur's paradox? Is it one thing or is it those 16 lessons or?
Yeah. So the paradox is the fact that what gets an entrepreneur into business, his expertise or her expertise, their craft, their skill, is what will actively prevent them from succeeding in business. So when like myself, this is going to date us, Josh. Sorry about this, man. But back in the day, my agency was all about Flash, Macromedia Flash, and then Adobe Flash, and
the kids don't even know what Flash is these days. They're like, "Are you talking about wearing lots of buttons on your outfit or something? What are you talking about?"
And it was this amazing technology. And I don't know if you remember the Brain Bench International Certification for Flash, but I took it and I ended up ranking number 2 in the world. And out of tens of thousands of people that took the certification, and it just supported what people were already telling me. I was working at Ancestry.com at the time, and people were like, "Oh, Flash? Can you build this for me? Can you build that?" And people were really excited about what I had to offer, my skill, my craft or my expertise, and literally being number 2 in the world for this technology. And all of a sudden, I get all these people saying, "Hey, can you do that for me? Can you do that for me?" And all of that fed into my ego. It fed into me thinking, "Man, I do need to start a business because look how amazing this is, and look how many people want this stuff." And so, like most entrepreneurs, I started with a craft. I started with a skill or an expertise, and the funny thing is, regardless of whether you're Bill Gates, well, maybe not Bill Gates, let's go Elon Musk, or Jeff Bezos or anyone else, we all have 24 hours in a day. And as a solopreneur, starting as a solopreneur, I filled every single one of those 24 hours to the point where there were several times I didn't even sleep for 3 days in a row. My head didn't even hit a pillow for 3 straight days. And that's because I was focused on building the product. And one question I ask every entrepreneur is, I say, if you're building the product, who's building the company? And that's the paradox, is that I'm so good at something that I love to do it and I want to do it all day long, but I have to actually give up being the best in the world at something in order to be the best in the world at building a company.
Which is hard to do because you go to hire somebody, you think, well, I'll just replace myself. I'll go find somebody else who's good at doing this. And then you can't find anybody, perhaps. I mean, you might find somebody who's as competent as you, but you can't find somebody who's as passionate as you. And so you go hire somebody and you're like, yeah, they're getting the job done, but they're not getting it done the way that I get it done. And then you get pulled back into actually doing the work, the product, the service. And I know exactly how this goes. I've been struggling with this for 20 years.
Yep, that's exactly it. And that is one of the pitfalls, is that entrepreneurs love to wear all the hats. They love to wear all the hats. I'm going to be the web designer, the programmer, the accountant, the lawyer, the garbage collector. I'm going to do everything. And it's hard. It's hard to break out of that and say, you know what, I'm going to actually trust. I'm going to trust. And delegating takes 2 types of trust. It's the trust that delegating takes. One is trusting others that they'll do it the way you want it done. And what you said is exactly right. No one is going to be as good as you or have the passion as you, especially not up front. So you have to be able to trust that even if they don't have that, even if they don't have the same level of expertise or the same level of passion, that it might be a little less, but you're going to trust that the job will get done. And the second part of trust that's really important with delegating is trusting yourself. And most people don't realize that there's that aspect of trust when you're delegating, because, and I go through an analogy of wrestling alligators in the book. That every day we wake up and we wrestle this alligator called, payroll, or we wrestle this alligator called angry client, or we wrestle an alligator called, whatever it is, or, just getting pulled back into the work. There's all these alligators we wrestle. And it's hard to remember that the goal is to drain the swamp when you're eye to eye with the alligator, because the alligator wants to chomp you. And understanding that draining the swamp means I create processes, I create systems, I impart my knowledge to those people that I've hired because I trusted those people enough to hire them. So now it's my turn to drain the swamp and give each person their individual responsibilities. And once an entrepreneur does that, it's the coolest thing, because if you think about wrestling alligators, you're always doing this. You're always looking down. And once you drain the swamp, for the first time in most entrepreneurs' lives, they can finally look up and they see that there's actually these beautiful mountains on Entrepreneur Island that they can start climbing. And those mountains represent an end goal, a destination. And there's actually only 3 end goals. There's only 3 mountain ranges that an entrepreneur can climb.
So what are those?
The first is a lifestyle company. So an entrepreneur can run a lifestyle company. They can be the flower shop on the corner, and they can just have something that supports their lifestyle. They can come and go as they please. They enjoy what they do. It's kind of a hobby business that, hey, I love this. It's great. It provides for my family, and I don't need much more. The second is a buyer be bought strategy. So merger and acquisitions. And the third is an IPO. And that's it. There's no other destinations, there's no other mountains to climb. There's only those 3 destinations. And each one is great in their own right. Each destination is great in their own right. But the mountains you climb are very, very different. The lifestyle company, I equate it to climbing Mount Timpanogos. You know that mountain. You're in Utah. It's hard. It's 15 miles. It's 4,000 feet in elevation, and it takes all day to climb. But at the end of the day, you go back to your bed and it's comfy, and you wake up the next morning, you climb it again. The buyer be bought strategy is like Kilimanjaro. It's, you have to prepare. You have to have 5 different changes of clothing, because you go through 5 climatic zones. You start in the tropical rainforest, you go through heather, moorland, all these zones, and you end up at an Arctic tundra. At the top of Kilimanjaro, you're in an Arctic tundra. And so there's so much more equipment you have to do. There's so many, you can hike Timp by yourself. You can't hike Kilimanjaro by yourself. And it's impossible. You need guides, you need people to climb with, you need porters to help carry the gear. There's so much more to the expedition that you really need to take a different approach. And then finally, an IPO is kind of like climbing Everest. It's, you can't do it alone. And if you do, you die.
Yep. If you don't die on the way up, you'll die on the way down.
That's right. That's right.
Well, this is exciting. I can't wait to read this, because you're talking about a lot of things that I've been through, that I'm still going through, and I'm still trying to figure out. So I've got to read this. Let's talk a little bit about your journey of writing the book. You had the idea 15 years ago, and you're just getting the book done now. Tell us a little bit about the path that it took to actually get this book done and out there and now published.
Yeah, it really took me making it a very concerted effort. It took me actually what it was is I was able to step away from my last company and just focus on the book. And it's funny because I would dabble. I had this file that I would, hey, I've got an idea, and I would just put 1 or 2 lines in every few months, and the years just kept going by and just kept going by. And it wasn't until I sat down and said, all right, this is going to be my job. I'm going to focus on this completely, that it actually happened. And I wrote the book, the first version of the book, I wrote probably 2/3 of the book before climbing Kilimanjaro. So I went right as COVID was starting. I went and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, and I came back home and rewrote the entire book. I scrapped the old copy and rewrote the entire thing, and I'm so glad I did, because you would think, holy cow, writing a book is long and takes months of work and all this, and you scrapped the whole thing, and I did, because it was so much of a better book with the analogy of Kilimanjaro in there, and it was more fun when I got back. It was more fun scrapping the whole thing and rewriting it from scratch than it was the first go around. And so I hired an editor to help me, wordsmith things and put it all down. And I wrote every word, but then the editor would come back, and he was awesome. His name's Platt Clark. He was so good. He would come and say, okay, this doesn't quite work right here. Let's change this. Or, okay, let's look at the flow of the story. Okay, if you're setting this up, where's the payoff at the end? And that I would be chronic with, like, here's an amazing setup, and then forget the payoff. and he would say he was really a coach in the writing process. And it's funny because in the book I talk about one of the chapters, one of the pitfalls is imposter syndrome. And it's funny because as an entrepreneur, it's a chronic habit of entrepreneurs to have imposter syndrome. And I'm not good enough. Look at how everybody else is doing. They're amazing. I'm just a hack, a scrub, a fake. I'm just this, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to pretend I do. I'm going to, fake it until I make it type thing. And as I was writing the book, I started going back into imposter syndrome. Like, I've never written a book. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, all these other people are famous authors, but I have, if you ask any of my English teachers from junior high all the way through college, they would not have picked me to write a book. and it's really neat, because with imposter syndrome, the reason it's chronic with entrepreneurs is that imposter syndrome is actually baked into entrepreneurship. Because if you think about it, you're doing something that has never been done before, in a way that's never been done before, at a time that we've never seen, in a market that's never been tried before. It doesn't matter if you're a high school dropout or if you're a Harvard grad, you still have to figure it out like everybody else. And it doesn't matter that you don't have all the answers, and that's okay. It's totally okay not to have all the answers.
And in fact, when you admit that you don't have all the answers, it's easier to get the answers.
That's when the real growth starts to happen. That's when the real growth starts to happen, saying, you know what? Hey guys, I don't have the answers, and it's okay. It's okay that I don't have the answers, because I do have an indefatigable drive to take one more step up the mountain. And it's going to be hard, and it's going to be okay, because that's all that I really need, is to take one more step up the mountain. And if another chapter in the book is you hear all the time, it's lonely at the top. It's lonely at the top. Nobody understands what I'm going through. It's lonely at the top. I have to make these hard decisions. It's lonely at the top. And I ask the question, why? That's dumb. Stop being lonely at the top. There's other people that will climb the mountain with you. And those people look like coaches and mentors and peers. And when we climbed Kilimanjaro, there was 17 of us. And it was as important to have those peers that were going through that journey together in a very vulnerable way, saying, like the final day when we left from base camp at 15,551 feet, up to the top of Kilimanjaro at 19,341. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, Josh. It was so hard. And I qualified for Boston. I've done half Ironman. I've done all these things. There's nothing that compares, nothing. And we were halfway up, and our guide, Simon, he said, yeah, they would, the entire trip, they would say, pole, pole, to the top, pole, pole, to the top, which means slowly, slowly to the top. And he just kept saying, we need to progress, we need to progress. And we get about halfway up, and we start at 1 a.m. We're halfway up to the summit from base camp. And it's so hard. It's literally, we've got our trekking poles, and it's like, step, breathe, step, breathe, because the air is so thin and the altitude is setting in, all of these things, and it's dark. And we make it up to this cave. Well, I call it the ice cave. I don't know if it has a name or anything, but it had icicles hanging down because it's freezing temperatures. And Simon goes, do not sit down, because if you do, you will not get up. And so half of our group sits down, and the other half of us, we're literally, we're lifting their spirits, but we're also lifting their bodies. We're literally like, come on, we got to get going. And I heard all the comments that you would hear in a business. What am I thinking? I don't have the expertise. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not a mountain climber. I didn't train for this. Well, all of these things. And people were even saying, I'm going back. And we're like a mile from the top. And we're saying, oh no, you came all the way to Africa. You hiked all this way. You've gone 22 miles to get here. You're not turning back. And we're literally lifting them. And in that same way, in business, be vulnerable, hike together, talk to other entrepreneurs and say, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing here. What did you do when you built your sales team, or when you started your marketing, or when you went and found a lawyer? Whatever the struggle is, be vulnerable, share that. Say, I don't have the answers and I'm okay with that. But share it with your peers, but also get a guide. We couldn't have done it without our guides. Each person on the expedition up Kilimanjaro had required by law, by the Tanzanian government, to have at least one guide. And so, without that, there's no way we would have made it to the top. But with that, and with the help of each other, it was an amazing experience.
This is why I love helping entrepreneurs to write books, because I feel like there's so much that's similar about the author journey and the entrepreneur journey. I mean, everything you're saying about the struggles of being an entrepreneur, you can replace entrepreneur with author, and it's the same thing. You struggle, it's a grind, it's hard, you feel like an imposter, you feel alone. You should have a guide, but a lot of people don't. And then you give up a mile away from finishing your book, and you're like, I'm done. I'm never going to put this out there. I mean, I know people who finish the book and then don't publish it because they're afraid to take that last step of actually publishing it, because then it's like, well, gee, now if I publish this, then everybody's going to tell me what they think, and I don't want to know what they think. So forget it. But they're done. They're like right there.
No, that's true. That's so true.
Yeah. So as you were writing your book, were you thinking about this? Like, hey, I'm writing a book and I feel like an imposter, just like I felt when I was an entrepreneur. Like, and what did you do? I mean, you had the editor who was kind of a guide for you on your book. What were some of the other things you did to get through the process of writing and publishing your book? Did you have help from other people? What actually helped you to make it through to the end?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, because my editor was amazing. And I'll tell you what, there were so many times where I had those exact same thoughts, the imposter syndrome thoughts that I had when I was starting my first, few businesses. And they all came back like, well, what if somebody doesn't like what I wrote? Well, what if there's somebody that's smarter than me that has a different opinion? And what if, all these what if. And I talk about this in the book, is there's one letter that will change fear into power. And a dear friend of mine, Richard Bass, he said that perplexing on the past produces pain, fretting on the future fuels fear. Only the present provides peace and power. And if we take that sentence, if we take what if, and we drop the F off the end and we put an S on instead to say what is. So think about these statements. What is in my power to control? What is my next step? What is my goal? What is my passion? Now, those have power. And even as I'm saying it, I can feel the difference. I can feel the difference of the what if statements. Oh, what if people hate me? What if I don't make money? What if, I get a bad flaming comment on Amazon? All of these things. And those are fear. But if you drop that F and add the S, then all of a sudden it becomes powerful. It says, what is my goal? What is my ability to help others? What is, and you just keep repeating that. But my editor, Platt Clark, he's amazing. He had the best advice. So I would write, and oh, that's not good enough. Write. Oh, that's not good enough. And I would just over and over again, just spin in cycles of the same chapter, rewriting. And it would take me hours to get a paragraph out because I'm like, oh, what if I say it like this or that? And Platt was phenomenal. This is one of his best talents. He's an amazing writer and actually a best-selling author in his own right. But he said, what I want you to do is pretend we're building a vase or a pot or some piece of ceramics. He said, your job is to huck the clay. Huck the clay on the wheel, and then together we'll turn it into a vase. Together we'll fine-tune that. But there's nothing to work with if we don't have any clay. So your job is to huck the clay. And basically he gave me permission to put things down that didn't have to be perfect. It didn't have to be, the glowing, polished, best looking thing you've ever seen. It was just clay. It was just like a pile of clay, hucking it on the wheel. And it was amazing because when I took that mindset of, I'm just going to spew this out. I'm just going to barf all over the page here and excuse the reference, but I'm just going to put it out there. Then all of a sudden it just started to flow. Instead of the consternation and oh, that's not good enough, I got to change this and that. All of a sudden it began to flow. And the funny thing is as he was training me and as he was coaching me and as he was showing me story structure and the hero's journey and all of these different pieces and parts of how to write a book and, the setup and the payoff and all of this, I was hucking clay, or so I thought. But as I hucked clay, amazingly, the clay became the vase without even trying. And as we went longer and longer into the writing process, it became more fine-tuned. I thought I was still hucking clay, but there were fewer and fewer changes that needed to be made. And it was an amazing process. I loved understanding that, not even during it, but after I was able to look back and go, oh, wait a minute. We just wrote a whole chapter and there was only a few changes in the whole thing. Whereas at the beginning, it was like the whole chapter had to be, reworked and all of that. But just getting that permission to do it as just a lump of clay, just get it out. And that was what really made the difference in the writing process.
That's phenomenal advice. Well, Curtis, thanks so much for being with us here today on the show. If people want to reach out and connect with you, where's the best place for them to find you?
You can purchase the book on Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble. You can also go to entrepreneursparadox.com. Or if they're looking to get some mentoring and coaching, they can send an email to consult@entrepreneursparadox.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Curtis, for all this great advice and taking us behind the scenes with your book, The Entrepreneur's Paradox. And thanks for being on the Published Authors Podcast.
Thanks, Josh.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to spread the word, please give us a 5-star rating review and tell your friends to subscribe too. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you listen to podcasts. And if you're an entrepreneur interested in writing and publishing a nonfiction book to grow your business and make an impact, visit publishedauthor.com for show notes for this podcast and other free resources.